Hello and welcome to Study with Sudhir, your own digital classroom. In this video today, we are going to be looking at and understanding in great detail the first poem of the ICSE Class 9 Treasure Chest poem. Okay, the first poem. It's called A Work of Artifice, and this is written by Marge Piercy. Marge Piercy or Mark Piercy, both pronunciations should be okay. Okay, so let's get started with this. And before we get into it, I will show you what exactly it is about. It's about a bonsai tree. Okay, but before we get into the bonsai tree, I want to point out about the poet that's basically an American progressive political activist with a deep interest in issues relating to feminism. Okay, and this poem is one of her early poems written in 1970. Okay, but it was published only 29 years later in 1999. Okay, in her collection called The Art of Blessing the Day, poems with a Jewish theme. Okay, you really don't need this, but this is basically for your understanding. Now let's come to bonsai. Now bonsai is essentially a very popular Japanese gardening technique wherein you kind of prune the tree and you grow it within a small bowl of sorts. You can see it here. You can see it here, and this is how you prune it using delicate scissors, and you kind of take care of the soil quality and the watering, etc. But the plant tree is kind of confined to this kind of a height. No bonsai tree is generally very tall, and that's precisely what she's talking about and focusing on in this particular poem. So it's considered in many senses a form of art wherein you kind of prune it in such a way so it calls for some kind of artistry, an artistic touch in order to be able to cultivate a tree this size. Otherwise, you can see this looks like a proper tree, but it is miniature and dwarfish in size. So the poet in this particular poem is basically describing the relationship between the gardener and the bonsai tree. Okay, what is the relationship? And it's a very fascinating kind of a poem, and the kind of meanings that she's trying to derive from this particular comparison that she's making, the relationship that she's kind of talking about between the gardener and the bonsai tree. So the bonsai tree, if you have to now talk about what exactly this poem is about, it's an attractive decoration piece. As you have understood, it looks very beautiful. Okay. The gardener essentially ensures that it is kept to this particular size. So for that, he or she will do whatever it takes in order to make it grow well and beautifully and attractively within this particular bowl or pot. But the poem is not about gardening. The poem, I repeat, is not about gardening. The poem is at a metaphorical level about the domination by men over women, the subjugation of women. Okay, so in order to convey that, the poetess has used the gardener and the bonsai tree as tools in order to make this larger point. Okay, I hope you have understood, the overall structure of this particular poem. Okay, so let's get to the, as far as the rhyme scheme is concerned. Let me just now get to the poem. This is the poem. So as far as the rhyme scheme is concerned, it is an unmetered free verse kind of a thing. There's no particular rhyme scheme to this particular poem. So in essential, in the notes I've written entire theme points. Please go through it so that you understand it better. Let me go through it fast. It's a poem. On the face of it, it's a poem about a small piece of vegetation, that is a bonsai tree. The meaning of the title, and that's very important. What exactly does the title mean? Okay, the title essentially means artifice, the main word out here. It means artful trickery. Okay, artifice essentially means artful trickery. That is to cheat someone in a very clever manner, in a very refined manner, in a rather sophisticated kind of manner. There is something very sophisticated about or very clever about the way you cheat somebody, in the sense that the person who is being cheated does not realize that he is being cheated, right? Which is why it is artful. So artifice essentially conveys something like that. Okay, it's something very deceitful, something very cunning. Okay, the third point is about, what the gardener is doing to the bonsai tree, and what does the bonsai tree symbolize. While I'm describing the poem, I will talk about it in great detail. Let me go through the poem line by line, but I would suggest that you please do read the theme points, because you can use that in your answers also, because they have been written in good language. Okay, so the bonsai tree in the attractive pot. This is a key phrase which you should definitely use in your answers, that the bonsai tree is growing in an attractive pot. Could have grown 80 feet tall if it was outside in the wild, in the forest, on the mountain. It could have grown to a height of, it could have been a tall tree and grown to a height of 80 feet. It could have been this tall on the side of a mountain. That could have been the actual nature of this particular tree, which is now growing inside a pot. Okay. However, and this is where the twist comes, kahani mein twist comes in the fifth line. Till split by lightning. What does it mean? Split by lightning tells us that the poem is not just a romantic celebration of a tree. It is not about a tree. In the earlier class 9, your seniors had a poem called The Heart of the Tree. That was also the first poem, incidentally, which was celebrating what the poem does as far as the environment and the greenery, etc. is concerned. This poem looks like a poem about a tree, but it's actually not just about a tree. So in that sense, it is one step forward from the heart of the tree, right? So till split by lightning essentially conveys that the bonsai tree has been carefully protected from harm because it is not exposed to the elements of the nature. If the same tree was on the mountain, in the hill, on the hill, in the forest, etc., lightning strikes, the tree can get burned down, right? So when you're outside, you're actually at risk. So what the gardener is doing on the face of it is to protect the tree from getting split by lightning. The tree, have you seen those kind of videos where there's lightning strikes and the tree simply crumbles, it gets burned down, right? So the gardener has protected the bonsai tree from meeting that kind of a fate by keeping it inside an attractive pot inside a home. Understood? Now, what is the point that the poet is making here? That by saying that it is growing inside an attractive pot, the point that is being made is that existence and development of one's potential. Listen to this carefully. Existence and development of one's potential is more valuable than a life that is all the time being controlled and limited. The gardener's point of view is that, I am protecting you, but what the gardener is also doing is to limit the tree to this pot, that this is the only area in which you can grow. It's like, the child may be told by the guardian or the parent that don't go and play outside, because outside, if you go, some stray dog may attack you, that like it happens in many cities and towns, or you will get wet in the rain, or there are honeybees there and they may bite you, right? Or you may get an infection by playing with other children, any kind of excuse. So what I will do is to create a small playground inside the veranda of the house, and you play in this 6x6 area or 8x8 area. So you are limiting the space for the children to play in, right? What happens? The parent or the guardian may argue that, see, I'm protecting him from the elements outside, but you are actually limiting the freedom and the ability to express of the child, for the child, right? So that is essentially, if I have to make a correlation between what is happening in the poem and what you would probably understand, right? So here the poet wants to make the point that an oppressed woman, similar to the bonsai tree, is not allowed to grow fully, not allowed to grow physically, because it's only this much height, because it's constantly cut and pruned, right? and obviously the emotions of the tree are not being expressed. So it is confined to a small attractive pot under the pretext of protecting it from the harshness of the weather outside. I hope you have understood this. Let's move to lines 6 to 16. But a gardener carefully pruned it. It's 9 inches high. So as opposed to 80 feet, now it is 9 inches high. So that is the limitation to which the bonsai tree has been confined to. That's the limit. You can grow up to a height of 9 inches. So please remember both these figures, 80 feet tall and 9 inches. You could grow up to this, but you are only this much. Okay, so the height of the bonsai tree is restricted to 9 inches, whereas its potential could have been what? 80 feet. Understood? Now, and the restriction is an everyday affair. How is it an everyday affair? Because every day the gardener is carefully pruning it. Every day as he whittles back the branches, means whittle means to cut to small pieces, right? Cut small pieces from the plant, as I showed you in the photograph before. And the gardener croons. Croons means to hum, to sing, while he's humming and kind of enjoying himself, but he's actually limiting the growth of that particular bonsai tree. He also attempts to brainwash the tree and the woman, in the metaphorical sense, that it is in her nature. Let us move forward. So while he's doing that, what the gardener is actually doing is to say that it is in your nature to be small and cozy. That, just like, in older times, perhaps even today, they tell the woman, tumhare liye kafi hai, it's your nature, you can do only this much. So you are kind of putting them down, and you're kind of trying to say that you are only capable of this much. You are not allowing, whereas the potential of that tree and the woman would be to be really tall. But you limit them to say, and you kind of brainwash them to say that your limit is only that much, which is so very unfair, right? So it is in her nature to be small and cozy, domesticated and weak. So these again are very important keywords. Okay, it is in your nature to be small and cozy. Cozy means comfortable, while being domestic, that is confined to the home, and also being a weak person, right? So that is what is the brainwashing that is being taken place by the gardener oblique man, as opposed to a bonsai tree oblique woman. Okay, so it's an equation between what? A giver and a taker. The gardener is the giver because he's creating the soil, the water, the manure for the bonsai tree. The bonsai tree is only taking, right? So the man also tries to have the same kind of an equation vis-a-vis a weak domesticated woman. Okay, now so that whole thing of, how do you manipulate the woman or the bonsai tree is very important, because it's suiting the purpose of the man or the gardener in this particular case. Croons is an important word. Croons, the singing, because it does not just convey music. It's not just about, that he's singing a happy song. It also conveys that, while you are doing something to cut someone to size. Listen to this phrase, cut someone to size. You're actually enjoying the process. Aap gana ga rahe hain. You're singing. When do you sing? When you are in a happy mood, generally speaking, right? I mean, you sing sad songs also, but generally you sing when you are in a relaxed, happy state of mind. So while you're doing something so sinister, something so evil, you're actually enjoying the process. That's why the word croons is so important. So if you get a question as to highlight the importance of the crooning by the gardener, you need to bring in the literal aspect as well as the metaphorical aspect. That the man also enjoys the process of, keeping the woman under his thumb, right? And that's why the word croons is very important. So you say that I'm keeping you safe, but you're actually keeping the person a prisoner of sorts inside an attractive pot. The pot is the home. The pot is the metaphor for the home. Okay. Now let's move to line 17 to 19. How lucky little tree to have a pot to grow in. So while you're saying that, you're also kind of telling, oh God, you're so lucky. Like a parent will say, how lucky you are to get this 6x6 place, private space to play with, without realizing that you have limited the freedom of the child. The same thing the gardener is doing, the same thing man is doing vis-a-vis woman, as conveyed by this particular poet. So it kind of shows a slightly vicious side, a slightly cunning, evil kind of side, diabolical kind of side. So the man considers the woman to be under his thumb. Hindi mein muhavra hai na, anguthe ke niche, right? So the intention is to dwarf their growth, limit their growth, by saying that, how lucky, how sweet, how little tree to have a pot to grow in. With living creatures, one must begin very early to dwarf their growth. So you are doing that from a very young age to manipulate their mind, to say that, this is the best for you. So the child also from a very young age, or the bonsai tree in this case, will start thinking that, yeah, if he's saying it must be good for me, without realizing that your mind has been manipulated by this so-called master, right? The bound feet, the crippled brain, right? So that's what it kind of leaves you with. Okay, I will tell you these two lines come meaning in detail. So what happens here is, what does the bound feet and the crippled brain mean? Now both these have historical context. Now in the pre-20th century, before the 20th century, there used to be a practice, Chinese practice, of binding the feet of the women from childhood, so that the feet remain tiny and very delicate looking. Okay, so if you bound their feet, the feet did not grow very long and they remained tiny and delicate. So this was considered a symbol of looking good and looking pretty for Chinese girls and women. There was also the practice in Western countries and also in the USA to curl the hair, the naturally straight hair. If the hair is straight, they used to curl them, right? That was a practice in the Western countries. Okay, the hair in curlers. Okay, bound feet. Okay, so while the practice, so both this practice in a sense were to kind of make the women look attractive. That's precisely is being done to the bonsai tree also. You keep cutting and pruning so that people say, oh, how a beautiful little small looking, tiny looking, delicate looking bonsai tree. So the same thing is happening with the women also. Okay, so though you can argue that the hair in curlers is not a painful practice, but to keep your feet bound is not definitely a very nice process. It's a painful process if your feet are all the time bound together. So basically the point being made is that oppression can take different forms. This may not seem very oppressive, but the idea is again to kind of enhance their beauty, focus on the external looks. This one definitely is a form of oppression which was practiced in China. Okay, so by talking of crippled brain, what does that mean? The poet is pointing to the fact that they're made to think, the women are made to think that this attractive way of looking is the only way they will be accepted by society. So the brain is in a sense crippled and influenced and manipulated by this kind of a notion that only if you look like this with tiny delicate looking feet and curled hair will you be accepted by society. That's the way to be, that's the way to be accepted. That's the way to look good in this particular society. I hope you have understood. The last two lines, the hands you love to touch. Now these are slightly complicated lines. Let me explain. Gardeners who fashion the bonsai tree using their scissors or whatever the other equipment that they may use to touch the branches, they touch the branches, they prune. Obviously they need to touch it while they are pruning and cutting the branches. Similarly, men love to touch the hands of the woman who they oppress. The object, that's a bonsai tree, and the woman are somebody over whom the gardener oblique the man is trying to oppress, but at the same time they are also touching the branches or the hands they love to touch, right? So men think that they're creating something very beautiful, or the gardener is thinking that he's creating something very beautiful in the form of a bonsai tree, and therefore they do not feel the guilt of oppressing the potential of growth and stunting their growth. So there is no guilt because you're touching and feeling, and you feel that you're doing it for their good, without realizing that actually you are not doing that. You are stunting and dwarfing their potential growth. Understood? Now the question being asked, therefore, at the end of the poem is that if a man actually loves a woman, should he be restricting her growth or allow her to grow with great abandon and freedom? So what exactly is love then? Because she's using the phrase word love here. What exactly is the idea of love? So is love to let the woman grow freely, or to put different kind of fetters or restrictions on her? That's the thought the poet is leaving you with. So the poem started with the bonsai tree, but it has moved to in a larger sense. Okay. The different meanings of dwarf is interesting, because in one way dwarf can be literally interpreted to stunt someone's growth. The other meaning can also be to belittle and insult and humiliate a particular person. And by using trickery, what I said, the artful deceit and cunningness, men are able to oppress the women and stunt both their physical as well as their emotional growth and potential, right? Gender of the gardener, because she has used the word he, it's very obvious that she's referring to a man. That's again very obvious. So after this, what I have done is that I have written a whole lot of question and answers, which you would find it easier to write with if you're attempting any of your workbook. Though I would always say, don't be obsessed with your workbook. Understanding of the poem is important. If you have understood this particular poem, look at the notes, look at the question and answers, you will be able to write quality answers. Understanding is what you need to focus on. Okay, workbook answers, fine, well and good, but the exam questions are not exactly the same as the workbook answers. But if you have understood it, you will be pretty fine. So I hope this is fine. I hope you enjoyed it. All the poems and stories will be done here on SWS for you children. Thank you very much. Any doubts, ask in the chat box, always there to reply and clarify all doubts. Never go into an examination with even a single doubt in your mind. Tata, bye-bye.